Excellent. I now welcome Associate Professor Darcy Allen, Dr. Aaron Lane, who represent Good Ancestors Policy. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to parliamentary committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, could you each please state your full name and capacity in which you're giving evidence today?
My name is Darcy Allen and I'm appearing in my private capacity.
And my name is Aaron Lane, also appearing in a private capacity.
My name is Greg Sadler. I'm the CEO of Good Ancestors.
And my name is Emily Grundy. I'm a policy officer at Good Ancestors.
Great. Thank you very much for being here. Is someone going to make some opening comments?
I'd like to make an opening statement.
You go for it.
So, good morning. Thanks for inviting us to give evidence today. So, Good Ancestors wants to help Australia's leaders be good ancestors to future generations by making forward-looking and evidence-based policy recommendations. We think artificial intelligence could be a force for good and a gift that we give to future generations, but it could also be readily misused and cause harm. You're probably already familiar with some of these risks. Hi mum scams use AI to clone a child's voice to trick parents into sending money to scammers. Only a few years ago, the idea that AI could clone a child's voice well enough to fool their own parent sounded like science fiction. Now anyone can do it for only a few cents. To understand where this technology is headed and what that means for the future of crime, we need to understand what it's already capable of. Last year, an AI model ran an automated cyber espionage campaign targeting governments and critical infrastructure. AI did 80 to 90% of the work autonomously, with human direction only at key moments. Cutting-edge risks like this will become widespread and new risks will emerge. Anthropic's new AI model, Mythos, is another example. A 0-day is an undiscovered cyber vulnerability. They're the crown jewels of cybersecurity. 18 months ago, an AI model discovered a 0-day for the first time. Now, Mythos has found thousands in all major operating systems and browsers, findings independently confirmed by the UK's AI Security Institute. Frontier capabilities rapidly become widespread. That could upend the cybersecurity landscape for everyday Australians and cause real problems even for businesses and governments that have invested in cybersecurity. This is an obvious problem in the cyber domain, but could be even more worrying in areas where criminals have previously had limited capabilities. AI could give a wider range of criminals capabilities from building biological weapons to conducting election interference. We think it's unfair and unrealistic to expect everyday Australians or even sophisticated businesses to cope with these risks alone. So what we're recommending is a multi-layered defence. So first, we have to understand the frontier. We need transparency from AI companies about the risks that they're creating and when things are going wrong. And we also need government capacity to understand and manage those risks. Currently, the disclosures that AI companies make, and we depend on to understand these risks, are largely voluntary. Second, we need to stop the worst of these capabilities from falling into the wrong hands. We should require AI companies to test their models for dangerous capabilities and not make dangerous capabilities available without suitable safeguards. One study found that only 3% of the hundreds of biological AI tools surveyed had any safeguards at all. Finally, Australia's defenders need access to more capable AI than attackers can obtain on the open market. Neither the Australian government nor any Australian business was given early access to Mythos to harden critical systems like Medicare or the power grid. AI is moving so fast that we can't take a wait-and-see approach. Highly capable AI is here now and has real implications from cyber to bioterrorism. Happy to take questions.
Thank you for those comments. We will receive and table these opening comments. Does anyone want to add anything?
Yes, we have opening statements as well. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dr. Darcy Allen. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Aaron Lane. We are scholars in economics and law from RMIT University in Melbourne. I'm also a director of the Digital Economy Council of Australia, and Aaron has practical legal experience as a member of the Victorian Bar. Together, we have spent over a decade researching emerging technologies, including cryptocurrencies, AI, and digital platforms. Our submission has two main themes. First, we describe how criminals behave like entrepreneurs. Like productive entrepreneurs, they spot opportunities, allocate resources, experiment with new technologies, and adapt to changing circumstances. Indeed, cryptocurrency is one technology that has shifted the economics of crime in complex ways. But policy interventions can change the form of criminal activity rather than simply eliminate it. Policymakers should consider how efforts to suppress one avenue of criminal activity may redirect activity into other areas. The second part of our submission provides direct empirical evidence from Australian courts. The number of criminal cases involving cryptocurrency in Australia has grown significantly, from a handful a decade ago to 119 cases in 2024. Courts are already dealing with fraud, theft, drug trafficking and money laundering involving cryptocurrency. And in most of these cases, offenders were caught using traditional investigative methods such as physical surveillance, intercepted packages and admissions during questioning. This tells us that many offenders are adopting cryptocurrency not because they are highly sophisticated, but because it lowers costs or is simply the most convenient option available to them. More broadly, our framework extends beyond cryptocurrencies. Other technologies, including AI models, can also act as a technological shock to the opportunity space for both unproductive criminal behaviour and productive entrepreneurial behaviour. Effective responses to this will require not just public enforcement, but also new types of private governance. We welcome any questions that the committee may have regarding our submission. Thank you.
Firstly, thank you very much for your submissions and particularly making yourself available today. It is a very different world than what it was even 10 years ago, let alone 3 decades ago. So obviously criminals have access to a lot more resources and money. It's very evident they're buying in services as far more sophisticated. So we're particularly interested to hear your views about where we go from where we are now, because I think we're at a point where we have to now get ahead of the game, and so your contributions as evidence will be very welcome. But I'm going to hand it over to Mr Batt as Deputy Chair to commence some questions.
Thanks, Chair. David Batt, member for Hinkler. To Mr Lane and Mr Allen to start with, in your submission you talk about crypto crime understood as a taxonomy. I'm trying to get my head around what all that means. So, and why different technology enable different kinds of crime, why different regulatory responses are needed for each. So how would you, can you sort of break that down a bit, but also how would you propose crypto crime taxonomy assist law enforcement in practice?
Certainly. Perhaps I might deal with the first part of the question and I might hand over to Darcy for the second part. The taxonomy that we've developed really just comes out of this idea that I think there's a tendency to treat crypto crime as a single sort of entity, and that everything using crypto is the same sort of thing. What we have tried to do with our research is show that actually there are multiple different categories, and we've sort of made a distinction between two methods, if you like, theft and fraud. Directly stealing something, directly stealing perhaps a cryptocurrency wallet or cryptocurrency keys that give you access to the wallet, versus fraud, which is deceiving somebody into providing that to you, and that's a well-known sort of distinction in the criminal law. But we also then have different contexts that occurs in. So we have pretty conventional fraud, which is seen as investment scams, romance scams. Those sorts of things have predated cryptocurrency, and yet I think the scammers in those spaces have adopted this technology as a payment mechanism, which helps get funds out of the country very, very quickly. But there's nothing particularly new about an investment scam. We then see intermediary-enabled crime, where you are stealing not from an individual, but you're stealing from a cryptocurrency exchange that might hold consumer assets. We're then seeing activity in decentralised environments as well. So really just the point of all this and how does it assist law enforcement, it focuses the mind on where is the main game? What is the main type of offending that we're seeing? What are the significant, most significant harms? Because there's no point thinking about the worst crimes imaginable in a hypothetical sense. It's more about, well, we've got to deal with the real world. We don't have unlimited resources, and we want to target enforcement into where the real harm is happening. So that's how we think the framework can be a useful starting point. It's not to say it's going to capture everything, but I might hand over to Darcy to add to that.
Of course. So in crypto specifically, if we're talking about cryptocurrencies and digital assets, we have seen legislation passed in this year in Australia. It's being implemented at the moment around regulating and licensing centralised cryptocurrency exchanges. I think that's a fantastic move because what it's showing is we can't regulate the entire crypto economy if we're talking about policy. There is a whole bunch of the crypto economy that doesn't exist within Australia's borders. It's not clear that any reasonable law enforcement could do anything about it. So on top of Aaron's point, that means that we should focus on those specific points at which we can have the most effective interventions. And in the crypto environment, that is those centralised exchanges. I'll leave it there, but broadly, it's difficult to... Often we get mixed up between the policy debates about how we respond to a frontier tech and then what we should do in terms of enforcement. A technology comes along. It's very easy for us to imagine a whole bunch of the harms around that technology, but it's much harder for us to understand all of the potential benefits of that technology. We've seen crypto legislation after about 10 years now of thinking about it. I think we're very early in the AI space and we're seeing it move very rapidly. I think having and putting resources into more adaptive enforcement and looking at crimes in practice rather than trying to predict where the technology is going to go.
Yeah. All right. And to yourselves again, on your submission about implies that poorly designed interventions can make things harder for law enforcement by pushing criminals towards harder to detect methods. Have you got any examples in an Australian context, how that's happened? And have you got any solutions on how to fix that?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. And I think the place to start is really thinking about, if we think about the intermediary enabled crime, if we regulate and say we can't use cryptocurrency in Australia at all, I think the point is that it's not that people are not going to use it. To Darcy's point, it will strip out some of the benefits. Well, a lot of the benefits from that. We have seen jurisdictions around the world, it's not a hypothetical, we have seen jurisdictions around the world say, we're just going to flat out ban it, we don't understand it, we're going to ban this technology until we can make it safe. Now, similar conversations are happening with AI at the moment, that, well, there are all these harms, we need to stop development until we can make it safe. Those conversations have been occurring as well. But what it can do is push people out of a space where there's a beneficial economic exchange. So if you're in a country that has banned this technology, all of a sudden you've pushed people in the crypto industry into a grey or a dark market, and all of a sudden, rather than servicing real consumers, everyday consumers, they're now having to pivot their business model and start servicing, whether it's money laundering, whether it's crime, other crime syndicates, whether it's drug dealing, and so on. And so I think there's I think that's the risk of that approach.
Yep. Righto. Very good. I've got one more for. I'll go with the good ancestors policy. Just to go to AI Act. You recommend about an AI Act model partly on the EU AI Act. There's some criticisms about the EU Act being a bit slow to implement, complex, etc. What lessons can Australia draw from the EU experience to avoid those pitfalls?
Great question. So in our submission, we recommended an AI Act, and importantly, what we were recommending is targeted AI-specific legislation to fill the gaps that existing regulators are not already filling. So you might have seen at the end of last year, we had the National AI Plan that was published. And in that, the government signalled it probably wasn't pursuing a whole-of-economy AI Act. In part, I think because of perhaps it seems too complex, perhaps it might overreach. Maybe there are quite a bit of criticism about the EU AI Act. We think that's reasonable, and we think that with many AI risks, existing regulators are fit to handle those risks in those domains. We do think that there are some specific risks which existing regulators aren't well placed to handle, and that's where we think it warrants new AI-specific legislation. So to provide a couple of examples, and these examples you can see reflected in the EU AI Act, you can also see it reflected in places like California and New York, even emerging economies like Vietnam. The first thing that we would recommend is around transparency. So at the moment, AI companies provide some information about their models and the risks they carry, but Australia doesn't require them to provide this information. Other governments or places like the EU, California, do require this information, but also sometimes the companies just provide it voluntarily. This is critical information about what risks the frontier models might carry, which the government, as far as we're aware, is not requiring. The second aspect is around incident reporting. What we would recommend is requiring incident reporting of critical safety incidents when they occur as the result of these models. Again, the EU AI Act requires this, California, New York also require this. So that involves a couple of things. It involves setting a threshold, what classifies as a critical safety incident. This is something which could be loss of life or major harm. It's not your routine faults. It also involves setting a notification period. How long does the developer have to notify government of this? And it involves confidentially reporting this to the respective government. I think that's a key thing, because even though other places like EU, California do require this, it's required to be confidentially reported to their government, not to ours. So we think there are a number of lessons we could draw from the EU AI Act. I think in particular those the parts of legislation that target the biggest companies, the biggest risks and the most powerful models, in particular transparency and incident reporting, that is what we think is key.
Very good. Thank you. I've only got 15 minutes left, Chair, so I'll let two senators.
Thank you. We'll go to Senator Cox, please. Are you there, Senator Cox? Otherwise...
Sorry, I am.
Yep, great. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to Professor Allen and, Dr. Lane. Just to follow on from the Deputy Chair's questions in relation to the technology neutral regulation that you've talked about in your submission. I'm just keen to understand, like you've recommended technology neutral regulation. I think you started to unpack that a little bit, but I'm really interested to understand if you have a practical example of how that might work.
The challenge when any new technology comes along is that we think we understand what the technology is. But the technology evolves very, very rapidly. And if I take cryptocurrency as an example, we were talking about regulating cryptocurrency from maybe 2016, 2017. if at that time we had attempted to think about cryptocurrency, stablecoins didn't exist, DAOs didn't exist, NFTs didn't exist, DeFi didn't exist, borrowing and lending. There's this huge area of the crypto economy that's been built with this technology that simply could not have been defined in any technical sense in legislation. Now, I think we're going to see some of those challenges as well with AI. The pace of it is moving so quickly that we expect that the applications and the technology itself will continue to move very quickly. And when you have that rapidly moving environment, we need to think about, well, how can we enforce against crimes in practice? And the way we should do that is we should look to existing laws to try and solve those. Take them, go through the courts. I'm not sure if Aaron wants to add to this.
Yeah, so we would see that I think there's two things to say. The first is that, as previous speakers pointed out, the government's response to the Senate committee into AI adoption has been, well, no, we're not going to pass an AI-specific act, but we're going to go down the path of getting regulators and departments to look at their legislation and see, well, is there anything in particular that might need updating? I was certainly involved in the Treasury's look at consumer law, just as one example on AI. In the criminal space, we've got pretty robust criminal statutes, both Crimes Act and Criminal Procedure Acts that will allow law enforcement to bring action, and if there are perceived harms, most of I think everything that has been described to me that I've seen tends to fit within an existing criminal statute framework and can be brought through the courts. What we've seen, at least through cryptocurrency, is that courts are more than capable of dealing with cryptocurrency evidence. We've seen that before courts, we've seen that before juries. There's nothing in my mind that says that courts and juries won't be able to do that in a criminal setting with artificial intelligence either.
Can you give us any examples of other jurisdictions where this is being successfully done?
Well, I think in the common law world, what we're seeing with again cryptocurrency as an example, we're now seeing the digital asset frameworks legislation that was passed earlier this year does not regulate blockchain technology, does not regulate tokenised digital assets. What it regulates are companies that are engaged in exchanging digital assets and Australian dollars, or digital assets and digital assets. And so the policy response, and this is not just in Australia, but really throughout the common law world of, whether it's the UK, whether it's the US, the focus is on the intermediaries, it's on businesses, it's on people. It doesn't seek to define the technology in and of itself.
Okay, thank you. We've recently, well, just before you came along, we had some police jurisdictions give us some information around, and they've taken some questions on notice from us around some of the blockchain tracing, and like the privacy element of that is the tools that around privacy coins, mixing services that are specifically designed to defeat blockchain tracing, and given that criminals obviously will adopt these when pressured, what's the realistic long-term effectiveness of blockchain analytics as an enforcement tool?
Thank you. It's a good question. Do you want to perhaps talk about the evolutionary kind of dynamics?
So we have this process, and this is the basis of our submission, that the criminals will continue to adapt, right? So as you shut down various parts of the ecosystem, the criminals will adapt, and they will be pushed further and further away from our regulated system. And I expect that we would see that over time, which is a challenge, but we also have to regulate in the context of the reality of what we can achieve. It's not clear to me what a single jurisdiction in the world could do about decentralised mixing services. I don't understand how, I don't know anywhere that that's been successfully regulated, because the criminals are acting globally. These are decentralised networks that are effectively impossible to shut down. So I do see some sort of evolution towards that. My worry is if we don't regulate effectively the lawful uses of the technology itself, then we won't get the benefits from the technology. We will just end up with a technology that increasingly pushes towards being out of our jurisdiction.
I think that... Sorry,
yeah,
Senator.
sorry, you go.
Senator, I think the other point to make is that the tracing tools are getting better all the time as well. And the sophistication of these tools is increasing there's a bit of an evolutionary game going on here. That there's a mixing service or a tumbling service that tries to obfuscate the funds. Well, some of the tracing technology, and this is essentially proprietary technology. There are 3 or 4 main companies that are involved in this software. Those tools are getting better all the time in response to the changing services and the changing business models that are going on. I guess in parallel to that, we've seen at an international level law enforcement. So in the United States, for example, there are mixing services that have been on the sanctions list. We've had allegedly people that are running these, or at least developing the software, are being charged with offences. So there's kind of this cat and mouse game going on, and I guess that's kind of as Darcy said, that's kind of the point of our submission, is that we're living in this kind of evolutionary, dynamic environment, and we'd expect that to continue.
And what is interesting about that is that a whole bunch of this is being developed in the private sector itself as well. It's obviously being used by law enforcement as well. This is what we saw in the early days of the internet too. There were a bunch of companies that were quite incentivised to figure out how to find fraud in payment platforms, for instance, because they want those platforms to be legally operating. So it's just interesting, that private dynamic as well, which is important.
Your final question.
Which goes on to my next question. It's almost like you can see through into my question pack. But given there are strong economic incentives for private actors to invest in what is crime prevention, right? But the police submission suggests that private sector cooperation is pretty much inadequate or inconsistent. What's your assessment of why that gap exists, and what would you recommend to absolutely close that gap?
Senator, I've got some really just some observations from my involvement in representing victims of cryptocurrency fraud and scams, and in that you do get. I think one of the challenges is that law enforcement are receiving thousands of requests, in a given week about fraud and scams and those sorts of things, and so increasingly people are turning to private lawyers, and admittedly I'm one of them, that are using civil processes through the courts to try and track and trace and seek recovery for victims. Often you'll find that digital currency exchanges will not be terribly cooperative with you. I think the Australian-based exchanges are, but some of the international exchanges, just do not comply with court orders. They don't respond to communications and so on. So I think there are probably efforts in the civil law that can be improved, but in terms of law enforcement, again, the requests have to be made. There is still a lot of manual labour that goes into this sort of investigation, and I think state and territory police forces need to be adequately resourced to be able to do that job.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Cox. We're quickly running out of time, but I just will put a question so that we've got something on the record for people who, and there's lots of them tuning in, watching this, no doubt, as they do Parliament every day. But what is cryptocurrency? The conversation this morning has all been looking at the downside, the criminal use of that. Can you just quickly outline where cryptocurrency is being used and all the advantages of it, so that we have a full picture for the committee?
Fantastic. So cryptocurrency is often talked about just as a way to send payments, right? And that is an obvious way that we could use this technology. But fundamentally, this is a new technology that enables us to have new types of property rights on the internet. And what that means is that we can have new types of ownership on the internet. We can have new organisational types. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets power a whole range of frontier business models that are happening. This is a really important frontier part of the economy. It's not just happening for money, right? It's not just for money or for speculation. There are real business models out there building real products, including decentralised physical infrastructure. We have crypto projects where there are tokens that enable people or incentivise people to build wireless infrastructure in the economy. So real-life wireless communications running using crypto tokens. So there is this whole range of different business models. Money is one aspect, crime is one use of that, but it is a tiny portion of the overall crypto economy.
Well, that's very good. I think it was important to get that on the public record, so I appreciate that. I have a question in relation to the AI Institute that the good ancestry you mentioned in your submission that we need to have an institute. Can you elaborate a bit further on that, and also covering off who would be responsible for setting that up and taking oversight?
Thank you, Senator. So since we made that submission recommending the creation of an AI Safety Institute, and we've made that recommendation here, but also in other contexts, government in the National AI Plan late last year went ahead and created a AI Safety Institute. And so we're glad to see that I think just in the last week that has become operational. This is a great step, and it has functions relating to technical work to test emerging AI models. It has functions relating to international engagement and building international AI norms, and it has a role in supporting existing government agencies and regulators. I mean, our key reservation here is just that the Australian AI Safety Institute seems to be the worst funded in the world of any equivalent organisation. So it has funding of $7.5 million Australian dollars a year, which is forecast to decrease as the budget goes forward, despite government acknowledging that the impact of AI is increasing. So if we wanted to make the Australian AC equivalent to the UK example, which is sort of the world-leading example, that would have to be 7 or 10 times more budget than we've currently allocated it based on GDP or population. So there's a substantial increase to match. And that remit I was talking about for the AC, the Australian AI Safety Institute, is also perhaps the broadest in the world. So it's got that technical role, it's got the international engagement role, and this role of supporting agencies. So Australia has, I don't think there's a solid count, but like well over 100 agencies, regulators and departments that the AI Safety Institute is expected to support on $7.5 million a year. So there's a significant mismatch between this exceedingly broad scope and this exceedingly small budget. I mean, another point is that the AI Safety Institute is not a regulator, which is fine. It's appropriate that it's not a regulator, but it does mean, absent the support of a regulator, that it's missing a lot of the tools it would need to do its job. So Emily was talking about the need for disclosure of information, so what capabilities do models have? So if they can't benefit from someone who can disclosure, makes it harder for them to do their work. Similarly, there's no obligation in Australia for accidents and incidents to be reported, so we're sort of blind about the extent of AI harms happening in Australia currently, and the AI Safety Institute can't demand access to models to perform this testing. So yeah, we're heartened to see that the AI Safety Institute has been created. It's only been operating for a few weeks, so we don't want to be unfairly critical of it, but I think it's got a very hard job to do, a very large job to do on a very small budget, so we'd like to see that increased.
No, I do appreciate that. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but there may be further questions that we'll put on notice to you. So if there's anything else that you deem important after today's hearing, then we need to have those in by the 3rd of July. But we thank you very much and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Certainly, thank you.
Thank you. Right. We got our next people ready to go.
Yes, they're online. They're all ready.
Great.
And so far, so good with the ICS.
Yes, that's good. Let's hope we're back on track now.